People want to hear what we think about where's the transfer portal and NIL.
This has been the UT Bible Hour.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Wild, wild west, man. Jenna, we don't use that word. Oh, you were spelling it different. That's not our subject tonight. Okay, we are in Mark 4, everybody. Mark 4. Mark 4. Why did I say Mark 4? You're like, are we going backwards? Yes, we apparently are, or just me in my mind. Excuse me, Mark 8. We're at the close of Mark 8. And we'll get into 9 as well. Mark 8. So, just going back a little bit in Mark 8 to verses 13 through 21, we closed out last week sort of talking about some thoughts out of this section. We generalized for the sake of time out of verses 13 through 21 because we were running out of time. But this is not the only place. As you scan that section, Mark 8, 13 through 21, it's not the only place where Jesus deals with this principle. And I don't know if I mentioned it this way or framed it this way last week or not, but just to understand that Jesus, this principle, Scripture as a whole screams this principle. The apostles later in the New Testament, that writings of the apostles comprising the rest of the New Testament, that it screams this idea. Frankly, the Old Testament teaches the same idea. So throughout Scripture, you're going to get it said different ways. This is just Jesus saying it His way, as He does occasionally in the Gospels, especially to His disciples. The principle that if one does not want to see, he's not going to see. If one does not want to hear, he's not going to hear. There's the audible hearing, and there's the hearing, which means it gets past the ears and down to the heart. There's the visual seeing, and then there's seeing and understanding. The Lord knows what He made. He knows its frailty. He knows the human condition. He knows the human nature, the tendency, the temptations. Studies in human perception have always come back to two things. That people perceive things largely out of one or both of these things. It is past experience or present desire, or both. How is it that two people can come out of a room hearing the same thing from the same time from the same person and coming out having heard it differently? They heard the same thing from the same mouth at the same time. And what are your takeaways? And they're asking somebody, what are your take? Well, I heard, and somebody can say, that's not right. What really I heard. And I heard the same thing, same words at the same time. How does that happen? And studies in human perception say past experience, present desire, or both influence our perception. Barry, you had your hand up.
No, I was going to say, I mean, obviously that could depend on a lot of things, but something else that could depend on that, or, I mean, there's just the mood, in general, the mood the person is in at the time. Like if they're in a good mood or bad, it could influence the way they interpret, no matter what they're hearing.
There is a mood. There is a mood that's internal that looks like this.
Yeah.
Internally, whether it's doing this externally or not, internally, it's this. Right? Yeah. Kyle's back there going, yeah, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I want to hear this. Yeah. But now, sometimes I catch myself thinking that when I'm sitting this way. I cross my arms a lot. But I don't cross my arms a lot in a one-on-one conversation. And the only reason I don't, I might have more back when, but the only reason I don't is because since I've studied those articles on human perception, I don't want somebody to perceive disinterest. Even though it's not really fair, because I've sat this way with interest before. But the perception is that sometimes my hands are cold. What? My hands are cold right now. There's a ladies' class up the hall. Barry.
I was just thinking also, just kind of connected to past experiences. But maybe that person, earlier in the day, earlier in the week, or whatever, that there was something else that they were already upset about.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no matter what they hear that day or whatever, it's not going to get them in a good mood because they just can't get past it or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe they just haven't yet, or I don't know, just a lot of things can be related.
What Jesus is dealing with over and over and over with the disciples, even the disciples, who the claim is interest. The talk is interest, following, discipleship, following. With his own disciples, though, and then certainly with those who would constantly challenge him, like the Pharisees, there are those that don't want to hear and don't want to see. And Scripture screams this over and over and over. So I wrapped up last week in this section. I was just sort of saying, if I had to kind of boil it down to one thought, it would be this: if you don't want to see, you're not going to see. It doesn't matter what's in front of you. If you don't want to hear, you're not going to hear. No matter who's saying it. By the way, when you get my age, and there is an age in this room that is ahead of my age, but I'm not going to say who. There is. When you get our age, your parents are older. Once a man, twice a child. You can tell your parents, if they're elderly, you can tell your parents the exact same thing. In fact, you can say it first. And you can have hard evidence to whatever it is. And they can resist it. And the very next day, somebody can come along and tell them the exact same thing, and it's a good idea. It depends on what it is. Y'all know Dave Ramsey? Or who I'm talking about? So Dave Ramsey in the financial world says that once somebody, now this is the way he says it, once somebody has powdered you, and he's usually referencing the back, once somebody's powdered you, they really don't want to take your financial advice because they can't see you any other way. But somebody else can tell them the exact same thing. And, okay, there are times and there are situations and there are people that somebody won't hear from spiritually. Not then. Maybe later. Maybe after life happens a little bit. But not then. Jesus dealt with it all the time. So you go into the next section with the blind man being healed at Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and he led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. And he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. We've been to this exact place before. Why are we here? Verse 26, the last verse of the section. Why are we here? I don't understand. If the purpose of signs and wonders was clarification of who Jesus is, who Jesus was, He is who He says He is, and the purpose of signs and wonders, and as we read about them, they're written in this book, he says, so that you might believe and believe you might have life in His name. That's how John puts it. If the purposes of signs and the purpose of signs and wonders done by Jesus was confirmation of his message and his claims of who he is, why? And if when word would get out about that, only more people would be following, seeing, and hearing, why does he say, don't tell anyone about this? And I've uttered thoughts on that before, but I want to see what you say.
Isn't there always the second grade or third grade girl who like runs after all the boys and all the boys kind of run away from her? I mean, there's kind of that same principle.
I can name the one in my second grade class. Yeah.
Yes.
I get
I don't know. There's also like a theological question about this. I forget. It was those not the problem of suffering, but it's something about the not silence of God, or I'm trying to think about. It's something along those lines. Like that he's not he doesn't do what you would think he would do in terms of maximally. He's not like an accountant trying to maximize his overall spreadsheet often.
Yeah.
And I guess that's how love is, perhaps. That it's more character and story driven and personality and identity driven than spreadsheet driven.
Yeah. I do see Jesus asking questions like, one just came across my mind and it went out one side as soon as it came in the other, so it'll come back in a second. That also happens to us, doesn't it, Troy? Where I just had it in my mind and it just 2.7 seconds, it's gone. And it'll come back when I quit trying to think of it. Okay. So Jesus, rich young ruler, good teacher. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? There's none good but God alone. What's Jesus asking him there? Are you prepared to come all the way? Jesus isn't walking around going, God in the flesh, God in the flesh. Like somebody selling something on the street corner. He's not doing that. But here's a private conversation. And he calls him good teacher. He's seen something of him, heard something of him or from him, watched him, and maybe actions that have spoken louder than his words, as we say sometimes. But he takes advantage of the opportunity. Why do you call me good? There's none good but God alone. Are you prepared to go the rest of the way with me? And there are times, I say this over and over and over and over, and I've said it in this room in this quarter, about how Jesus always knew what time it was. Constant communication and awareness of his Father's will, requesting his Father's will, being directed by his Father's will or to his Father's will. But yet here is a man possibly wanting to do it differently at times, but having to yield to his Father's will. As a man, the natural emotion to go, God in the flesh, right? Because even for the right reason, not out of self-pride or pompous or anything of that nature, not that ugly side of human nature which he could feel or be tempted to feel. Not for that reason. But hey, wouldn't that just draw more people? And here, but the timing of the Lord, which is always always perfect. The timing of the Lord. Mark 8, by the way, Kaylin, Mark 8, fixing to pick up in verse 27. We just finished the question out of verse 26. Why does Jesus perform a sign and then say, again, as we've said before, don't tell anyone? So that's out of verse 26. That's where we are.
Didn't we discuss before that there were times when maybe Jesus was tired or he wanted to pray or be alone? There were times when he sent the disciples out in the boat. He stayed on the shore. Seems like we talked about that before.
Yeah, we have.
He lived as a man, and if this guy went in the city and said, "Look what Jesus did for me," he's going to be swamped with people wanting to heal him. And living as a man, there were probably times when Jesus was just like, I need some me time.
Sure.
I need to be alone.
Sure.
I think we've talked about that.
Yes, we have. And oftentimes to speak to his Father
Yeah.
for direction. By the way, you know what you never see, though? If I'm wrong, find it and tell the class about it, and I'll step back and say, oops, I missed that. But what I never see is Jesus foregoing the doing of the good for that reason or any other. It was just do it, now don't tell anybody. It wasn't, I, I can't do everything. First of all, he could. But second, I can't, because if I do that, that's just going to draw a crowd, and I know what time it is in my ministry. No, he does it. He did do this, and then said, don't tell anybody. Because sometimes it might hinder, what might follow would hinder him from doing the next thing, the next place he needs to be, the next thing he needs to do. And he knows that. Yeah.
Maybe he just wanted other people around to tell other people. Because that's ultimately what Jesus wanted people to do, was for people to tell others about Jesus.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just like, you don't have to tell, but other people will share that. So
Yeah.
maybe that was part of it, that he wanted other people to share those
I
things.
mean, why he would not do certain things.
Well, they were just like, for just the practice of just sharing, for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, it would be something that we call all his disciples to do at some point, and certainly later. Um, so when you get to verse 27 through 30, Peter is going to make a confession. Obviously, this is not the only time that you're going to see this throughout the Gospels. This is just Mark's account of it in Mark 8. They are around the towns of Caesarea and Philippi, and they're on the road, and he asks his disciples, who do men say that I am? Hey, what are you hearing out there? Right? What are you hearing out there? What are the claims that you're hearing? Now, is that looking for information, or is that to start the necessary conversation with the disciples? That's a jumping off point for something he's trying to do with the disciples. It's not, hey, what are you hearing? Right? Because even though he did come, as Troy said, he does come fully human, but he also comes fully divine. And the fully divine part means he already knows what's going on. He knows the thoughts. He knows the thing. He knows what men are saying. He can read them. He can read their thoughts. He can read. But it is a jumping off point for a needed conversation for the ones who would have to take the lead in the greatest work known to man and the establishment of the church. So he's talking to them. So he answered, John the Baptist. Some say Elijah, and others say one of the prophets. So Elijah or one of the other prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Let's pause right there for just a second. Why is he asking that question? Is he needing to vet their genuineness? Is that really the issue? Is it vetting their genuineness? It might seem so. And if somebody thought, yeah, I think maybe to a degree he's sort of vetting the genuineness of the ones that are following. I don't think so. Doesn't mean that that's not potentially there. Doesn't mean it's not. I'm just telling you, I don't think so. But I don't have an argument. I don't have a Greek language argument here out of this verse. Or I don't have anything like that to go on. I'm just telling you, I don't think so, just personally. But who do you say that I am? Peter answered and said to him, you are the Christ. Then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about it. Here we are again. But can you recall times when your parents would try to teach you something? You didn't even see it at the time, but later on, a little bit later down the road, maybe you weren't fully grown yet, but you were old enough to see it, what they tried to do earlier. Just a little seed. It wasn't sit down in a chair and I'm going to tell you something and you're going to listen. It wasn't one of those teaching moments, although those happened also, right? Those happened.
Say working with 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds, I stopped saying, okay, you say sorry for hitting him, Instead, I say, John, do you remember what you did? And he'll recall.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, why are you sorry now? So that they understand, or their little brains are
Yeah.
connecting those dots, so that it's not just I can hit a kid and say sorry and be okay.
Yeah. Just their parents have to adjust, and they have to parent according not only to the nature of the child, because you may have two children, you got to teach them the same thing, but it doesn't mean you're going to teach them that same thing the same way, because this one won't hear it that way. This one will hear it this way. You're going to have to tell it a different way to this one. By the way, that's straight Hebrew Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. In the Hebrew language, the punch is on the word he. It's clear. It cannot be misunderstood. We misunderstand the verse and misuse the verse, misteach or preach the verse, and a lot of parents have beat themselves up with this idea over the years. They're wrong to do so because it does not say what some people think it says. That, in other words, if your child winds up erring and going a different direction than you had hoped, then it automatically points back to the parent's lack of proper instruction. That verse does not teach that. It does not teach that. And you can prove it in the Hebrew. Train up a child in the way he should go. First of all, a proverb is something that is generally true, not something that's always true. Okay? The basis of a proverb has nothing to do with absolute certainty. It's something that's generally true. And the percentage of the time you're better off that. Yes, train him up in the way he should go. It's a proverb, number one. Number two, it's not talking as much about spiritual matters as it is showing the practical nature of Scripture, including throughout the book of Proverbs often, life lessons. Not just spiritual life lessons, but this life lessons, for this life even. You train him the way he should. You teach him the same principle as you want to teach this one because you believe this is what I believe my children need to hear, but you may not teach it the same way to both because they're not the same. That's what that verse is saying, and you can prove it in Hebrew. Okay, oftentimes Jesus is training children, and I mean his disciples. Children in the faith. In faith matters, they're still children. In faith matters, they're still very young. In faith matters, he's got to continue to bring them along. And he knows what time it is, back to that idea, and he knows how much time he's got left before he's no longer with them. And you can see sometimes the frustration, probably because, okay, it's been a while now, and I need you to be further down the pike. Have I been with you this long, and yet you still do not understand? Kind of concept, right? So, Jesus, who do you say that I am? Who do men say that I am? Well, some say this, some say that. Well, who do you say that I am? So we had to do this occasionally. And then later, it was just a seed. And it's not, hey, make sure you see that seed I dropped on purpose so hopefully you'll understand later down the road. You don't even tell them that that's why that seed was dropped. You just got to drop them constantly. And then a little more and in different places. Or this one needs to be a tennis ball size seed. And this one, and so you do that, right? And then they begin to, and they're more capable of certain things as they go along, more capable of understanding. So this was Jesus with his disciples. Who do you say that I am? Think about, and by the way, look at who's answering. Who's answering here? In verse 29, Peter answered and said, what does Peter mean? Or what's the name Peter mean? By the way, you ever do a baby name book at the checkout line at Kroger? You ever looked up Peter? Peter, Petros. Petros. Okay, it's not just a good like fast food chili, but it's or whatever that place is called. What's that place called? The green, their colors, Petros, yeah. So there you go. Rock. I don't. That's weird for chili, but rock, little rock. Okay, look, Peter was called Little Rock. Okay, you're my little rock, right? And so you got the rock of confession that comes through Peter. Upon this rock, the confession that Jesus is the Christ. By the way, I was in the Vatican, and we walk in, and I turned. Anybody been to the Vatican? Anybody been to the Vatican? Hopeful, great trip. Okay, okay. Don't kiss the foot. Do you know how many thousands upon hundreds of thousands upon millions now have kissed that toe going into the Vatican? Yeah, I refuse, and I got a dirty look. Right? Okay. Little rock upon Peter. They say, well, upon this rock. Your name is Peter. And Jesus said, upon this rock. The rock is Peter. No, Peter's not the rock. The rock is the confession. Upon the rock of this truth. This is the foundation. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. But have you ever heard the phrase, if you don't believe it, nobody else will? Who does Peter have to become? Yeah, if you don't, Peter, you're going to be preaching in Acts 2. Lord already knows this, by the way. It wasn't decided after the resurrection. Lord goes back to the Father. Well, it's about that time. Have we assessed everybody? Yeah. What do you think? Peter? No, Peter. I was thinking Peter. They got it. The Trinity is together there, and they're talking it over. No. Peter's got a lead, very much lead in the early church. And if you don't believe it, by the way, if Peter couldn't get to that, he would not have been able to preach in Acts 2. He wouldn't be able. Wouldn't have been chosen, and he wouldn't have been able to do the job. So, that's 27 through 30. So you get to the last two sections of chapter 8. Jesus is predicting his death and his resurrection. And so he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Should they have known this? Some fashion of this? Would they have ever heard anything about this? Was there ever a prophecy concerning the Messiah, the coming Messiah, and the suffering servant and all that? Like maybe in Isaiah? Yeah, Isaiah 53. He spoke this word openly, then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Now, let that sink in. You remember when God said to Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? We got the same thing right here. Right? I mean, you really have the same thing right here, where Jesus could have looked at Peter, God incarnate, God in the carnal, in the flesh, could have looked at him and said, are you serious right now? I knit you in your mother's womb. Right? That was David's statement of faith. You knit me in my mother's womb. Well, he was referencing God. Okay, he was referencing God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, John 1:1, and the Word was God. Okay? Wrap your mind around, I try to wrap my mind around Peter pulling Jesus aside to rebuke him. Okay. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, now it's funny, it does say he rebukes Peter. But what does Jesus know? He knows the source here. He knows the source of the problem within Peter right here. Get behind me, Satan. For you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of man. Satan has a job that, and it may look a lot different with one versus another, but the goal is the same. If I can get you to, if I can allow you to cast doubt on some truth of God's plan, if I can just get you to cast doubt, that's it. So you get to verse 34 through 38, and he wraps up the chapter. When he called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, we got a mix here. The people with his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Let's pause right there for just a second. Verse 34, I've never really thought much about this. I've thought of it before, but I didn't dwell on it. And it's been a long time since I dwelt on it at all. But reading on this afternoon, I wanted to come back to something out of verse 34. Verse 34, in one single verse, in one sentence, really, in one single verse, Jesus gives the entire issue to man. Heaven's going to record, and hell is going to record the real issue. Self-denial, self-king. Self-king. I am the captain of my ship. What's that quote? I am the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my ship. I'm the master of my fate. Is that it? Well, I do have a say-so in my fate, but I'm not the master of my fate. Because because I've got to accept something. But if God doesn't first make a choice, nothing else matters. So both of those phrases are wrong in the whole. Self-denial and that following includes a cross. You got it right here. This is it. This is discipleship. Last night I was being asked, what's your subject going to be for Connect Conference this year? So we're in the middle of planning. We're like, what are we? 3 months out. We're 3 months out. We're inside 100 days. Going to be good, by the way. But last night I was being asked, hey, give me your topic. You got to tell me. And I'm like, I know. Or your title. I know what my topic is, but I was trying to think of how I was going to title it. And I thought about this idea. Heaven is going to record, and hell is going to record. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And I wouldn't be rejoicing at the fact that currently your name is written in hell. Both sides, heaven and hell, are going to record that this was the single issue. It really is. This is the single issue. Self-denial and instead, or as I deny self, I then turn and follow Him. But that following Him is not always a feel-good fuzzy, but it's not following if it doesn't allow the cross. I follow until I have to carry a cross. I'm not following so much. But I can't follow without a cross. I don't mean if it wasn't for the cross. That's not what I mean. Deny self, and there's two things here. Deny self and take up his cross and follow. So it wasn't just lay this aside and walk that way. It was lay this aside and walk that way with a burden. That was just on camera. I always forget this is on camera. I'm sure that looked good going across camera. Hi, Theresa. Hi, Steve. They're always watching. This is the crux of salvation right here. And that's just in one sentence.
Sandy, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if it's question, statement, provocation, or something. But so we think about faith alone as part of the Reformation,
Right?
And then James kind of reshapes that in terms of how we think about it. Certainly, Jesus does as well. It seems like this is an addendum. I don't want to say an addendum, like a formal addendum, but I mean it sets that bar so much higher than just saying yes and getting dipped.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think there's also the question of, particularly verse 34, about the must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. And then verse 38, if anyone is ashamed of me or my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, they will be or the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when they come in His Father's glory with the holy angels.
Mhm.
So, but both of those are definitely put, I think, a much higher bar on what we think of as faith, and it's almost in kind of a scary way, in a way of like fear and awe at the same time. Almost.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do. I like the way you phrase that. And it takes me back to, I don't remember if it was Sunday morning or Sunday night, but sometime within the last month-ish, my one one of my sermons there on a Sunday morning or evening recently was about, you have heard that it has been said, but I say to you. And do we ever see when Jesus says that the bar was lowered? Now, it wasn't as a matter of earning something, but it's to be like Him, number one. And number two, does He not deserve that from me? Where is my real gratitude for the amazing grace of God that I sing about? Love the hymn, sing loudly, but I'm not really amazed if I'm not amazed enough to want to raise my bar. That grace doesn't lower the bar. Titus 2:11 and 12. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. Next word is, there's a comma there. And then it says, teaching us to deny ungodliness and live soberly and righteously in the present age. Grace came saying something. And it should come raising my bar out of my desire for what He's done for me. Kaylin Garris, I'm sorry. I almost said killing.
That'll work.
Killing.
I'm doing that sometimes. So I wanted to back up a little bit. Verse 33.
All right.
When He rebukes Peter, and He says, "Get behind me, Satan." And I've read that a bunch, like a bunch, right? I mean, especially if you've been a Christian for 10 minutes, you're pretty familiar with the Gospels, hopefully. And so, glossed over it most of the time. Get behind me, Satan. Oh man, he was mad. He called him Satan. Then, if you look at what the name Satan means,
Yeah.
Hebrew, adversary or to oppose, and you look at Peter's actions in that moment, unknowing to himself, he was in opposition to God's plan and to the mission of Jesus when He tried to rebuke him for what he is as far as his suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, he took on essentially, again, unknowingly, the title of Satan.
Yeah.
Because he was in opposition to God.
What you're doing is, whether you know it or not, is in opposition. Is placing an opposition, a stumbling block to my Father's plan. Yeah, that's right. It's, well, here's an analogy to what you're saying that I think is a great point. Why we sing sometimes about what song is that? What hymn is that we sing? I have to hear it. I have to sing it in my mind here. Da, 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 da. What hymn is that? It's a newer song. Ashamed I hear His mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that placed Him there. Oh shoot! As wounds that mar the chosen one. Y'all aren't helping me at all.
I'll never say.
Say that again. How deep the Father's love. Thank you. That's it. Yeah. How vast beyond all measure. How deep the Father's love for us. How vast beyond all measure is the song. So that phrase, it was my sin that put Him there. So at the cross, Jesus became sin. Here's a verse that you're familiar with that goes well with that song. A passage that goes well with that song. He became sin who knew no sin. Paul wrote this to the Corinthians. He became sin who knew no sin, that we may become His righteousness. So at Calvary, Jesus became sin. Because somebody had, that's the propitiation is the biblical term. The replacement. He became sin. Now, you've got a sinless one becoming sin. Okay, why did but there's a phrase in the song, the Father turns His face away. If you think about that song, there is a point where it says, the Father turns His face away. Why did God, my God, why hast Thou forsaken me? Because He can't have anything to do with sin. And so when Jesus became sin, the Father can't have anything to do with sin. So it's an illustration right there of what's going on. Same thing right here. He became in His opposition. Now Jesus did that willfully. Peter does it because he doesn't understand, and he submits to the temptation. But the analogy is I think similar. Peter became something in that moment. In effect, he became something in that moment. So he calls it that. Yeah. So verse 34 and finishing out the chapter when he called the disciples to himself, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So that's the essence of what heaven, the names recorded in heaven and the names recorded in hell. That's going to be the issue. For whoever desires to save his soul will lose it. So he's following up with the same thing. You got to deny self-denial. That will never be a popular message. It will never be the populist message. Okay? Lose. You have to lose to win. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. You got to lose to win. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? A lot of times verse 36 gets quoted a lot, but we need to put it in the context of the whole section here when we talk about it. Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? I was teaching a class not terribly long ago elsewhere. I was doing something for another church, and a lady came up to me after services, and she made the comment that I was talking about exchange, and she just couldn't agree that it was all about exchange. I had made the comment that it was all about exchange. Afterwards, she just said, "I don't understand. I couldn't go along with that unless you're going to explain it to me differently. I just couldn't go along with that. Help me with this because I don't see." We don't. She's seeing exchange as I have something of value that I bring to God. Well, how about if like we're bartering? Exchange. I'll give you this, you give me this. What I was talking about was I'll exchange my cross for a starry crown where the gates swing outward. Never that song. I wasn't talking about the song, but that's the idea. I'm going to exchange my cross for a starry crown. I'm going to exchange this world for a better world. This all that is offered here for what He has to offer. I'm making a decision. I'm making a purposed exchange. I'm going to lay this down. How many times did Paul say, lay down, lay aside, put off, take off? He'd use one of those phrases and they'd say, take up. Lay aside and take up. That's an exchange. That's what I was talking about. And I didn't want to have to do this. But she was continuing like that. So I had to go to this. So guess what? I quoted, what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? It was right there. And when I went to this verse, she goes, oh, there you go. There you go. For
She was thinking that she was going to need to do something to God to get something from God.
she was afraid that I was suggesting that we have anything of value. To,
we can get something in return.
exactly. She heard the word exchange and she took it in a direction that was not my meaning. So anyway, she understood once we talked about it. but she can. But here it is. What would a man give in exchange for his soul? Uh, for whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed. Shame for shame, in other words. Shame for shame, if that's the way you want to look at it. That's the middle of verse 38, is it not? If I'm ashamed, by the way, here's a song that I absolutely love that we don't sing a lot. Also, this is singing night with Andy. Um, singing night. This is a hymn that we don't sing a lot. And I got to remember the title. But the chorus, she left. I was just about to hum, Kyle. I was just about to hum. And oh, may this my glory be, my glory be, my glory be, that Christ is not ashamed of me, is not ashamed of me. That's the chorus, but I don't remember I don't remember what leads up to that. So you may not remember. And it's like, my glory be, my glory be. You know, that Christ is not ashamed of me, is not ashamed of me. Yeah, got it. Anyway, the scripture says that can happen, though. That can happen. He can be ashamed of me. And how does that happen? Well, the way it happens is it's shame for shame. I was ashamed of you. I was ashamed to own you. Remember that other song? I'm not ashamed to own my Lord. I got them. I got them coming, man. They're flowing. They're flowing. And so, shame for shame when you look at verse 38. Okay. So that wraps us up out of chapter 8. Why did I think I was going to get through Mark 9:13? That was never going to happen. Anyway, but we will next week. We'll get in here next week and do the first half of Mark 9. And if time permits, we'll go further. And that's that. Thank you.
But I'm gonna guess. You know?